The more you try to chase, the further they pull away. Amazingly, when you start to let go, they actually come closer. Not only that, in many cases, they don't just come back, but they also start thinking about you more often, seeking you out, and ultimately becoming much more enthusiastic about pursuing you than before. It sounds like a game, but it's actually a pattern. If you're honest with yourself, you've probably been in the opposite position. In the past, you were probably the one always chasing, always present, paying extra attention, and trying to be the best. You were patient, understanding, and even often gave in, but all you got was coldness, a perceived distance, and uncertainty. Gradually, without you realizing it, your life began to focus entirely on them. Your moods were affected by them, and worse, you felt compelled to keep chasing so you wouldn't lose them. At that moment, everything changed. There's one important thing that often goes unnoticed. The more you chase someone, the more you actually devalue yourself. Conversely, when you learn to let go, you create an attraction that's stronger than mere attention, something that makes them unable to stop thinking about you. This isn't about manipulation or pretending to be indifferent. It's about understanding the dynamics of human psychology and, most importantly, how to take back control of yourself. In this video, I won't be giving you your usual motivational speeches. Instead, I'll show you how to shift gears from being the one who constantly pursues you to being the one who is pursued, sought after, and even missed without you having to ask. So make sure you watch this video until the end, because as you go further, you'll begin to understand why, when you truly let someone go, they can't stop chasing you. If you're ready to stop being the chaser and start being the one being pursued, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Now, let's get to the first point you need to understand. Why is it that when you stop giving, they feel lost? The first point is to stop feeding their ego by removing the source of validation they've been receiving. Without realizing it, you've become a charger for their ego. Every time they feel low, you're there to recharge them. You text them first, you're attentive, and you reassure them that they're still wanted. Like a charger that's always plugged in, you keep charging them regardless of whether they truly need it or not. Over time, your attention, which once felt special, becomes something ordinary, like a battery that's always full, never knowing what it feels like to run out. The problem isn't the act of giving, but the habit of giving endlessly. Your attention, which once meant something, now becomes a byproduct, always there, but no longer feels special. This is where many people make the mistake of thinking that the more they give their partner attention, the more their partner will notice and appreciate it. However, the opposite is often true. The more you try to give your all without limits, the less they feel they have a reason to care for and appreciate you. In psychology, this phenomenon is known as intermittent reinforcement. This principle is not based on something consistent or always available, but rather on something suddenly disappearing or changing, thus creating a stronger emotional dependency. The key to this shift in dynamics is a moment of complete silence, not just a gradual reduction in the intensity of your attention, but a complete stop for the first time. When you are no longer the source of energy and attention they have been relying on, they slowly begin to feel the impact of the diminished validation they had always considered available. At first, they may not immediately feel lost or panic, but a sense of discomfort begins to emerge. They will begin to realize that there is a real change, that something they previously took for granted is now gone. At that moment, you no longer position yourself as a means of fulfilling their emotional needs, like a never-ending charger. Instead, they're the ones who start looking for ways to fill that void. Interestingly, this drive doesn't stem from your requests or demands, but from a profound sense of emptiness they're experiencing for the first time. This emptiness is a lesson for them to understand the value of what they've been ignoring. The second point is about stopping overreacting and becoming a solid, impenetrable wall, not a mirror reflecting every action. All this time, every time he acted, whether indifferent, push-pull, or paying attention, you always responded, sometimes with emotion, sometimes with greater effort or trying to fix the situation. Unknowingly, what you were doing was reinforcing the game he was controlling. He just wanted a reaction. Your anger, your sadness, even your desperate attempts to hold on, because they were signs that he still had influence over you. Now imagine if all those responses stopped. No more emotional overreactions, no defensiveness, and no extra effort to explain anything. This is where the concept of Stoicism shows its power. True power comes not from what you say, but from your decision not to respond. When you stop being a mirror that reflects and choose to be an immovable wall, something interesting begins to happen. His ego loses its orientation. In psychology, this is called psychological starvation, where someone accustomed to receiving a response suddenly loses it, and their brain starts working harder to find answers. They overthink, start asking questions, and try to fill the void with speculations in their own mind. At this point, you change from someone predictable to someone mysterious, from someone always available to someone elusive. It's not because you manipulate the situation or play the same game, but because you stop responding to the person that has been empowering them. This is where the real control shifts into your hands as they begin to lose their grip on their own ego. The third point we must understand is shifting energy and changing the gravity of our lives. Don't let yourself become a satellite constantly orbiting someone else. Instead, become the center of gravity for your own life. All this time, perhaps without realizing it, your life has revolved around this person. Not only is your time wasted, but your life's direction seems to be influenced by them. Moods often fluctuate, decisions are postponed awaiting their approval, and even your day feels complete or ruined depending on their reaction. When that happens, you've actually lost something very valuable. Not them, but control over your own life. When you allow your life to depend on others like this, you're not truly living your life based on your own choices. Instead, you're simply reacting to things that come from outside yourself. In psychology, this condition is known as a locus of control, meaning the point of control is outside of yourself. If your locus of control is outside of yourself, you'll constantly feel unstable and tend to lose direction, always waiting for others' decisions, always dependent on external influences. As long as this continues, you will be in a weak position because you are not taking control of yourself. It's time to make this a turning point. The change you need isn't waiting for him to change, but rather starting when you stop making him the center of your life's orbit. Start making decisions without considering his reaction. Take concrete steps without being hesitant about his response. When you redesign your life's direction without him as the primary factor, that's when gravity begins to shift. Shift your effort and energy into truly taking back control. Then, eventually, you will no longer be in his shoes. You will no longer orbit him. This isn't about simply walking away, but about regaining full control of yourself. When someone loses their influence over us, they will naturally try to regain it. The difference is, this time, it's not because you're calling for him or wanting a reaction, but because you have become independent and uncontrollable. At this point, your position shifts from being the one who always follows directions to the one who sets the direction. People will always be attracted to those who are in control of themselves, because that authority and independence creates a natural yet powerful attraction. This fourth point talks about creating a deliberate emptiness, a quiet space that allows the mind to be occupied with itself. Let that silence no longer be just the absence of sound, but become the most noisy presence he has ever felt. Maybe you've always been there, always explaining, always responding, and without realizing it, always trying to fill in every gap so that the relationship feels clear and defined. However, with all that effort, you lose one of the greatest strengths you have. Humans are instinctively uncomfortable with uncertainty. When everything is so clear, predictable, and always available, the brain has no reason to work any further. There are no mysteries to explore, no questions to answer, and nothing to miss. Everything becomes flat, even bland. Now imagine if the situation were reversed. You suddenly disappear, but without inviting excessive drama, without a long speech explaining everything. You just choose to remain silent, letting everything hang in the air. In the world of psychology, this is known as the Zeigarnik effect, a natural human tendency to continue thinking about something that is unfinished or does not have a definite answer. And then, something interesting started to happen. Slowly but surely, he will start to fill the void with his own thoughts. Old moments started to come back to his memory. The dialogues from the past endlessly echoed in his mind. He will start to wonder, reanalyzing your every word and action, trying to figure out what is really going on. But without an answer from you, his brain will reflexively create its own answer. And often, these answers are more emotional than rational. It is at this point that small but significant changes begin to appear. You, who used to be just an ordinary part of his life, are now starting to look special. Your once consistent presence has now become something that feels absent but very surprising, and the feeling of loss rises intensely within him. You, who previously might have been considered normal, are now starting to be missed in a different way. He starts to romanticize who you are, not because you've really changed, but because the empty space you've created he can't ignore. Ironically, it is often not closeness or physical presence that makes someone connect more deeply, but rather the unexplained absence. It was that emptiness that was complicated to understand and impossible to ignore that was the biggest driver of his mind. Fifth point. Your steps should not be something that is always there, like the air we breathe every day. Oxygen is often not aware of its existence because we are used to having it. However, when oxygen suddenly disappears, what appears is not calm but panic. So are you, always present until your presence no longer feels special, not because you are worthless, but because the human brain tends to ignore things that are always available. Here, many people misunderstand the principle of scarcity. They think it's about rare appearances to make it look valuable, even though that's not the essence. What drives someone to chase is not because you are rarely present, but because they start to feel your absence. There is a big difference. Something that is rarely present is not necessarily missed, but something that was always there but is gone will create a real void. The human brain will not remain silent in the face of this emptiness. Without realizing it, that person begins to compare past and present situations, when you were there and now you are gone. Previously, everything seemed easy. Now it feels unattainable. From here, a realization slowly emerges, not because you explain it or demand understanding, but because the feeling of loss arises naturally. It's not about disappearing to play with other people's feelings, but rather about stopping being something that is considered certain and irreplaceable. When things that are considered certain disappear, the value begins to be felt, not just in logic, but in deeper layers of emotion. When that moment comes, you are no longer seen as just an existence that continues to exist, but as something that can actually disappear. And from there, the desire to find you again will arise by itself. The sixth point discusses breaking away from dependency and finding strength in not depending on others. The most dangerous people are not those who are the strongest, but those who don't need anyone. As long as you still feel like you need someone, you don't actually have complete freedom. You will continue to wait, adjust, and even restrain yourself so as not to lose. All of this can be read without needing to be said. In psychology, this is known as dependency, not attraction or love. Dependency is always in a weak position. On the other hand, someone who does not depend on others is calmer. He doesn't rush, doesn't overreact, and doesn't feel like he has to defend something through self-sacrifice. Even when he loses, he remains stable. Detachment does not mean not caring, but rather being free from emotional dependence. In this concept of emotional independence, a person no longer depends on his sense of security or happiness on the existence of other people. Whatever comes or goes, it remains intact. When it reached this point, something slowly changed. You stop trying to attract attention, stop hoping to be seen or noticed. You just live with what is. And this attitude actually changes the way other people see you. For the first time, you become difficult to influence, difficult to predict, difficult to control. This is the essence of Stoicism, not about owning something or someone, but about not being owned or controlled. When someone realizes that they no longer have influence over you, what arises is not comfort, but the urge to take back control. And that's where they start to get closer. Not because you need them, but precisely because your independence has made room for the attraction itself. Seventh point, build a new version of yourself and let him chase after your past. Don't go back to your old self. Let him try to find a different person. Many people hope he'll come to his senses and return, but rarely realize that when he finally does, you should be in a very different place. The changes you're undergoing aren't to win him back, but to create the best version of yourself. This is what's called an identity shift, not just a superficial change, but a profound transformation in your way of thinking, viewing yourself, and determining your life's direction. You're starting to improve yourself, physically becoming more well-groomed, mentally more stable and less reactive, and having a clear purpose in life. And all of this isn't for anyone else, but entirely for yourself. Now imagine the moment when he comes back, trying to find a niche in your life, trying to re-enter the same way he used to. But this time, you're a new person, no longer someone who's always waiting, not someone who's always there whenever you need him. And at that point, you see him with a different perspective. He is no longer someone you need, but only someone you once wanted. This is a crucial moment for you to understand. True victory isn't when he comes back or when he starts chasing you. Victory comes when you realize you no longer need him, when you let go of everything, without forcing, without begging. He might come back and chase you even more persistently, but this time, you're no longer living for it. Ultimately, this isn't about him. It's about you. It's about who's in control of your life. You've probably been too busy chasing something that isn't even necessarily yours, too busy defending someone else, that you've forgotten to defend yourself. And now it's time to stop, not with anger, not to prove anything, but with a simple decision. Stop, let go, be still, and return to your own life. When you're able to do this, something inside you will slowly change, a change that's not for him, but for yourself. You'll no longer wait, no longer hope, and no longer depend on anyone else for your happiness. At this point, you've achieved freedom. You're no longer an option, a backup, or someone to be fought for, because you're now completely out of the game. Understand this, you didn't lose him. You simply chose to stop chasing someone who never chose you. And if he ever comes back, chances are you won't care anymore. That's true victory. It's not about his return, but about being able to feel content without relying on anyone. If you're here, it means you've grown and are no longer the same person you once were. Take care not to revert to the old version of yourself, always chasing aimlessly. Now it's time to move forward and live your life with renewed control and confidence.